Today on Call for Two, a spoiler-free review of the 3 hardest games in the Cryptic Killers Document Dump Cold Case Mystery series. Are these games right for you? Stay tuned to find out. Cryptic Killers is a series of document dump cold case games. This is a genre that there are dozens of available on Amazon or direct order. These are all available on Amazon for about $25 each. There are about 6 or 7 games in this series, and Cryptic Killers is regularly producing new ones. These are the 3 hardest ones in the series. Very conveniently, the company lists the relative difficulties of the different games and expected play times and stuff, so you can get all that from the Amazon page. They're also very recent. Murder at Mediluck Industries is, I'm filming this in April 2023, and this just came out this month or last month, and the others are all in the last year or so. And as I said, these are their 3 hardest ranked games. You can see playthroughs of all 3 of these on this YouTube channel. It takes us about 5 hours for each of them to play through and then review them, but it'll take you half as long without breaks and reviews. After you play the game yourself, if you do purchase these games, you might want to check out our playthroughs, see how we differed from you, and listen to our spoiler-filled review at the end of those sessions, where we also talk about specifics of the game from a game design perspective. In this review, I'll be deliberately vague and spoiler-free so as not to give anything away. I should also say I've purchased these games myself. I have no relation to the company. It makes no difference to me whether you buy these or play these. These are all one-shot games. You'll play them once for the 2 or 3 hours, and that's it. You'll never play them again. However, you do not have to destroy anything in these games to finish them, to play them, although in some cases it might help for you to make a copy of it or so. But that means you will be able to pass it along to someone else or trade for it. So before I get into any more details, and then at the end of this video I'll rank these, I thought we would look at one of them, look at the documents that come to give you some idea of what you're in for. But if you're a super stickler for spoilers, you could look away or skip through this, but I'm just going to show you what you would see the moment you open the game. All right, so it's not like this stuff is staged out. You don't have to read too much. You don't have to pay too much attention to the text. But again, this is not spoiling anything. This is exactly what you would get. So you open up the envelope, you've got some instructions, and these games tend to be mechanically separated into multiple acts. So you can see this game, Murder of a Musician, is separated into 2 acts. There's a very thin part 2 and then a thick part 1. Most of the documents are in here. You've got a list of the contents of the envelope, and we're going to pull this up and just quickly scan through it. So we've got a little piece of physical little prop. Then we've got some instructions and little staging of the case. Most of these cases, at least most of the Act 1s of these cases, are similarly framed. It presents you with this crime that has just happened, typically a murder, and then you've got a bunch of suspects, and your task is to eliminate some of those suspects. Let's look at the evidence, then we'll talk a little bit more about it. So very common to have some reports, some social media printouts or email printouts, some more police reports, some various letters found at the scene or discovered by the detectives, and then a whole bunch of witness statements, fairly high quality writing in general and high quality material document presentation, including using different handwriting fonts, different handwriting, believable looking handwriting for different witnesses or suspects. So these are more statements from witnesses and suspects. Here we've got a little prop thing that doesn't serve any purpose, a little pamphlet, full glossy pamphlet. Lots of reading in these games, as always. A little printout, a little gimmicky certificate, photos you might get, a little map that has a small use. And there you have it. That's part one. Part two I will not show you because you won't see that until you're halfway in. So that just gives you some idea of the quality and quantity of the documents. Again, part two is much thinner, much less items than part one. All right, so let's talk about this series in general, how it compares to other games in this genre. I would say in general, the writing quality here is quite good. These games sometimes, these kinds of games sometimes have typos and bugs and errors. These are actually very carefully produced and edited. The writing is good. It's not the most compelling narrative atmosphere game, but it's very competent, very good, and it feels like you're reading real police reports. The quantity of documents is about average, I'd say, good quality. There are some areas, however, where this game excels, and these are this is a very subjective genre. You could have an experience with your group and have a great time if you're on the same wavelength, and if not, you might not. So you have to take reviews of these kinds of games with a grain of salt and just know that you could have a better or worse experience depending on random factors out of your control and just how you hit it. However, I would say that this series has a bit of a personality, a stylistic spot that it's carved out that is quite interesting and might be the sweet spot for you. And what I think that spot is sort of clever Perry Mason moments in the evidence and in the nature of the crimes in terms of twists. So it's staged into acts to make it more like a TV show with maybe a twist or a development that's exciting. And in some of these games, we've had some real moments where we've been debating and chewing on theories. And in many of these games in this genre, you might like have an early suspicion, and it just builds and confirms at the end. So a very linear trajectory of your theory to conclusion, and you're just looking for ways to prove stuff. Whereas there's much more attention in these games, at least the hardest, these three, to sort of breaking your prejudices so that you might think you understand in the beginning, and then there's a twist or little moments where you think you understand everything, and then you're like, well, what if it's this? What if we've misjudged something? And because they're so well written, you really can bring to bear all of your thoughts about the psychology of people, what's likely to happen, what could someone get away with, what kinds of plans might a criminal come up with. And it's a little bit of a risk for these kinds of games because there's a little bit more willingness here to have critical pieces of evidence that if you miss or you misinterpret, could lead you to make a mistake. On the other hand, if you're willing to fully embrace the seriousness of the challenge of solving these mysteries, and especially if you're with a group, I would say this is a game best played with a group, where you've got people to bounce ideas off of and brainstorm and discuss things. Really, one of the real joys of this genre is playing with someone, a teammate or a couple people, who enjoy the process of talking through evidence and theories and pausing and saying, let's stop for a second, let's talk about some theories of this case, what makes sense. If that's your group, these really do work well. And you'll see on our live stream play, if you see, that for each of these, we had real moments where we stopped, sat back and said, let's talk about where we are here. Let's talk about whether our current theory really holds up, whether it's consistent with all the evidence. And as I said, one of the special things about this company, this series, is a real attention to crafting a mystery with those little aha, eureka, Perry Mason moments where you're like, I got it. I found the piece of evidence that really breaks this case wide open. And the pleasure when that happens is palpable. And this series excels at that. Okay, now having said that, let's talk a little bit about maybe some weaknesses here. I would say in general, these aren't the hardest games of this form in the genre. If you're a super, super experienced group and you really want to be challenged, these might not quite give you the challenge that some of the hardest games are, and maybe they're a little bit on the shorter side compared to some other games. The questions tend to be fairly limited, and there's some oddity occasionally about, like, you're going through this whole part one, all this stuff, and there's lots to chew on and think about, and then the question is just asking you to eliminate a couple suspects, which you could have answered half hour into the game. So a little bit of disconnect between trying to understand everything and then answering some very limited questions. I would say maybe Epilogue is in the medium range in terms of quality and quantity and satisfaction. It does have a fairly good hint system. They all use the internet a little bit. And in fact, I would say probably from my subjective opinion, this is what you want in terms of internet use. The people who like these kinds of games tend not to want to spend all their time on a device, on a tablet, on the internet, and searching. Some of the games in this genre, not in this series, in other series, say, well, you may have to use the internet whenever. And if someone mentions they have a Facebook page, you might have to go and start searching Facebook for accounts and entries, or doing Google Maps, and just, it's so open-ended that you end up spending a lot of time on your device when you really want an evening away from your devices. And here, they all use the internet for a very limited scope place. And it's almost all logging into their portal and looking at a few extra pieces of evidence that come in over the internet. So logging into their portal webmail and reading 4 or 5 extra emails, or seeing a couple extra reports that were just sent in. Very minimal use of the internet, not painful. It adds to the case. It's done cleverly. It's done well. It's not frustrating. So from my standpoint, and I'm suspicious of internet use in these games, this series does it well. Let's talk about perhaps the ranking of these games, if I was going to rank them for you without giving away. And I would say they're all quite high quality and very close in quality. So subjectively, I'm not giving you very useful information here, because you could hit these slightly differently than us and your rankings would be very different. But I'm going to give you the rankings that I think matches up. We played them live on YouTube with 3 or 4 other people, and everyone, I think, had basically the same rankings, but very close. I would say Murder at Mediluck Medicines was my favorite of the 3, followed by Murder of a Marine Biologist, which I think we thought had the most compelling narrative setup. We cared more about the characters in Murder of a Marine Biologist than any of the others. And then Murder of a Musician, which was quite good, but maybe the lesser of the 3. Again, though, your mileage may vary. So there you have it, the Cryptic Killers series. I'm a fan. I would absolutely buy additional games by them. I will buy additional games by them, but probably only the ones marked at this level of difficulty, which I think these are ranked at. So you can see actually on the bank. Murder at Mediluck is rated as a 4.5. Murder of a Marine Biologist at 4 of 5, and Murder of a Musician at 4.5 out of 5. Take those with a grain of salt, but I think I would happily play any game at 4 or higher difficulty level. Less than that, I think you're talking about a quicker game for an experienced player that probably not for me, but that's not to say it wouldn't make a good game for you if you're just starting out in this genre, or if you're playing it solo. And playing these games solo basically doubles the difficulty. So pick one, pick the one that's on sale on Amazon, give it a try. Let me know in the comments what you think if you do. And you might check out my other videos for other games in this genre to see if this genre is right for you. We're living in an age where you've got lots of great choices and lots of great fun. And maybe you'll even join me for a live playthrough in the future. I'll see you next time.